Hey guys, welcome back to Team APS, Paul here. So I've been thinking about Yu-Gi-Oh! I've played it for a really long time, and in this video I wanted to talk about the things I've noticed that have changed the most in just the past maybe decade. Because I started playing this game competitively in around 2009, and so it really has been about 10 years since then, and a lot really has shifted. And I'm not just talking about oh, they introduced Xyz or links or pendulums. I mean just sort of differences in, card design, differences in player trends as far as deck building and the actual matches go. And it's an interesting topic because, there's not a right or a wrong. I know some people prefer old Yu-Gi-Oh! Some people actually prefer new Yu-Gi-Oh! My goal with this video isn't necessarily to start a little fire with that, but I will be sharing things I've noticed and my opinions on them. And at the end of the video, I want to hear what you guys think, whether you prefer, some of the changes that Yu-Gi-Oh's gone through, where you see it going in the future, how you feel about all the stuff I brought up. All right, let's hop in. So the first major thing are the differences in card economy. So in case you don't know, card economy is basically the idea that different cards have net values when you use them. So if you activate Reinforcement of the Army, you will search one warrior monster, but then Reinforcement of the Army will go to the graveyard. So it was a 1-for-1 trade, or a net 0. On the other hand, with a card like Pot of Extravagance, for instance, you banish your 6 cards from your action deck and draw 2 cards. You got 2 cards and you lost 1, so this was a +1 in card economy. So how does this all relate to what I'm talking about? Well, back in 2010 or so, I'll be using a lot of examples from that time, the idea of cards going +1, +2 was, I want to say it's unheard of, but it was a lot more rare. The cards that could just get you a straight advantage were kind of huge. I mean, anything that, where there was Blackwing Shura, when it attacked to get you a free Blackwing monster from the deck, that was a big deal. Of course, Elemental Hero Stratos, before it got infamously banned, that was a really big deal. It got you a +1 straight from the deck. And this is also the reason why cards like Pot of Greed, for instance, are banned, because they're just raw plus cards. These days, I feel like that's definitely not so much the case. It's kind of a given that decks right now will plus, and a lot too. So, I think of what I read on Reddit these days, where a new archetype gets announced, right? And people, they'll get on WIGO Pro and they'll break and do these crazy combos. And it's this crazy new deck can go +8 on the first turn with this combo. And that's insane. I mean, if you think back of 2010, that's just wild to me that a deck could ever have thought to go plus anything more than maybe 3 or so on the first turn, except maybe the tip top tier decks. And nowadays that's just standard fare. That's not something that's limited to meta decks. A lot of decks right now just plus loads. And I think that shift in card economy has also shifted just how people think about the value of a card. It's okay to take a neg for a specific card's effect, like a nightmare effect or whatever, because it doesn't matter. You'll regain all of that card economy very quickly. And it even goes into the whole idea of many more decks nowadays float, for instance. So the monsters, when they die, will usually recover cards back. Decks are very consistent. Decks will get to the things they need. They will make pluses. And I think that maybe that's even the reason why Konami did the whole going first player only draws 5 cards, just to kind of offset that. I'm not really sure. For me personally, I don't think I entirely like that change, because I like the idea of cards kind of having a sense of value, where an individual card needs to be used very carefully, because if you misuse it, then you'll actually lose a lot of advantage in doing so. I think of prime examples of cards like, Torrential Tribute and Mirror Force. They could destroy your opponent's entire field, or they could only destroy 1 card. And whenever you use one of those cards against just 1 monster, it always kind of felt underwhelming. Same thing with MST. If you ever used MST in a card, that's a 1-for-1. But if you ever got a card MST, then they chained it, then they still got the effect off of it, and it was a neg-1. I like those nuanced interactions, so I don't really enjoy the way that the game kind of hands you the advantage on a silver platter. Alright, next is the shift away from the battle phase in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, the battle phase is kind of one of the fundamental parts of this game. The idea that you summon monsters, they have attack points, your goal is to swing over your opponent's monsters with stronger monsters. And that is something that I think in Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't really exist anymore. Now, of course, yes, we still do the battle phase, yes, we still swing over monsters, but I feel like it's kind of just more of a means to an end. Like, it will get your opponent's life points down to 0, but the game is oftentimes decided long before the battle phase. It's largely decided by that card advantage, like we were saying, that your opponent usually got, or just the amount of negations on the field that your opponent has, the amount of disruptions they've got, like your ability to fight back against a field of really crazy monsters. It doesn't feel like the battle phase itself means a whole lot, and as a result, we've seen a big shying away from cards that are battle phase centric. In fact, those cards are often seen as weak. So if we go back to 2009 or so, we've got cards like Blackwing Shura, the Blue Flame. When it attacked a monster and killed it, you got a Blackwing from your deck. This was a big deal. It meant that for a Blackwing player, the battle phase was very important, and you wanted to have ways to swing over your opponent's monsters. That's what made things like Kalut so strong in tandem with Shura. Or you have archetypes like Gladiator Beasts that literally focused entirely on the battle phase. They had to successfully attack or be attacked and survive so that they could swap out and get a new Gladiator Beast, and so that was kind of the whole strategy. These days, a lot of archetypes are not really battle phase centric, and the ones that are, the ones that have, effects that focus on changing attack and defense and that kind of thing, tend to be some of the weaker archetypes. It's really unfortunate because I do like the whole idea of a battle phase mattering. I like the idea that a deck of beat stick monsters with like 1900 attack at a time was seen as like a really strong strategy, or monsters that float when they die, like Mystic Tomato, for instance, were seen as really good, or Sangan. Nowadays, that stuff is just too slow, and the battle phase just doesn't feel like it's very important. I can't say I'm a big fan. Number 3, you guys knew I would bring this one up, is the loss of trap cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or, rather the trend that they are sort of dying off. So once upon a time in Yu-Gi-Oh! The trap cards were a really big part of the game. Things like Mirror Force, things like Torrential Tribute, these cards were extremely powerful. Bottomless Trap Hole, Dimensional Prison, these are other ones that come to mind. And of course, we can't forget about the Solemn Brigade. When your opponent set cards, it was a really big deal. You had to be really afraid because there were so many different traps that could disrupt your plays or even get rid of your entire field that, it was important. You needed to have ways to play around them. Monsters that were immune to traps were obviously a good asset to have. Things like MST and Heavy Storm, while it was legal, were really big deals. And, a lot of people even would worry when Heavy Storm got banned and like MST was still like at 1 and stuff. It's like, oh, our trap's too strong now. And I think nowadays traps they're not around. There are some decks that use traps, and we do still see some isolated instances of traps being used outside of that, but it's definitely nothing like the whole your opponent has set stuff, you need to be worried. These days, it's either evenly matched or infinite impermanence, which both activate from the hand. So, it's hard to even call them traps necessarily. Or you've got like floodgates, your goes and match, there can be only one, summon limit, anti-spell fragrance, those kind of things. They're just focused on like not letting the opponent play at all. Those are like hard calls. They're maybe in the side deck, or if you're playing something like Altergeist or True Draco, perhaps they're in the main deck. But other than that, trap cards are dead, and I never thought I would see the loss of even things like the Solemn cards, like Solemn Strike and Warning in particular. Very powerful cards, but in the OCG, they're slowly moving off the ban list, and that might even happen here. I think part of the reason traps are gone is just because, they're too slow. The game is very going first centric, which is something that we will get into here in a bit. So it basically means that, if you go first and you have big combos to make, you don't want traps. Those are clogging your hand. You can't use them on your first turn. And as the player going second, you don't really want to run a lot of traps, because if your opponent's making this crazy board in their first turn, then when you go second, if you draw a bunch of traps like Solemn Warning and all that, it's not going to be useful when they've already established a board. And then there's also the fact that hand traps have kind of taken the place of traps. They kind of do the job traps do better. They still disrupt your opponent and stop plays and can even get rid of cards sometimes, but they also are a lot easier to use because they're in your hand. They can't get MST'd or Twin Twisted, for instance. So, it really does feel like trap cards are not in a great position right now. We're getting some pretty strong new ones like Manhunt, for instance, soon. But I don't know, it's really hard to say if traps could ever come back. So number 4 is the difference in boss monster design in Yu-Gi-Oh! This is a really huge one. So boss monsters are literally what you expect them to be. They're monsters that usually have high attack points, are kind of hard to get out. When they are out, they have really powerful effects, either something that, prevents the opponent from doing things, or something that kind of protects them. And the balancing factor in boss monsters is that hard to get out factor. The fact that, it's kind of your ace. It's not something that you can summon on the first turn of the duel, but it's something that you build up to, and when you summon it, your opponent oftentimes will be hard-pressed to stop you. That might be your win condition. Back in the day, and I hate to say that so much, but back in the day, boss monsters came in many different forms. I think of cards like, say, Dark Armed Dragon, cards like Stardust Dragon even. Those are really strong ones, like a lot of the early synchros were. These were boss monsters. They were difficult to get out. You didn't usually get to summon them early on. If you did, it was a big deal and it would put you in a good spot, but it wasn't often that you did. It usually cost you some amount of advantage to summon these things. Some of the better decks could summon boss monsters at not so much of a loss, but that was generally the thing, and the boss monsters had good effects. Getting out of Stardust early is a great thing. Even over time, we've seen things like, say, Divine Dragon Knight Felgren, just a random Xyz monster that I can use as an example. Good boss monster, high attack, kind of takes some resources to get out, but it can protect itself or other cards and give your opponent a tough time. These days, though, I think that that's kind of totally different. Boss monsters are so much easier to summon now, and like en masse. A great example is the Thunder Guard Dragon deck, for instance. Being able to summon several boss monsters. You can summon, a Morphage Goliath, Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, Thunder Dragon Colossus, and like all in one turn, and they all have powerful effects that on their own probably wouldn't be awful to deal with, but when you have to deal with like 3 or 4 of them all in one turn, that's really crazy. And I think that a lot of the problem for me comes with the fact that Konami has made summoning them feel so like such a gimme. A great example, Thunder Dragon Colossus, you tribute a Thunder monster, he's there, right? And that it's no loss in advantage. The Thunder monster might even float, if it's Thunder Dragon, and that's that, so I don't like that design in Yu-Gi-Oh! I feel like, boss monsters should be more of an end game. They should feel more individually important, not just things that you stack up and up and up on your opponent so that they can't possibly play against you. Not a big fan of that. One interesting side change, though, that I have noticed, at least regarding the extra deck, is that monsters in general are not as boss monster centric as they were in the maybe early Synchro or even Xyz days. Nowadays, I see monsters becoming more like toolboxes. So later in the Xyz era, we got things like Castel. We already had, stuff like, say, Abyss Dweller and Utopia the Lightning. It's kind of a boss monster, but they were more like utilities, like a toolbox. And even with Link monsters, a lot of them, there are boss monsters. There are the Borals, for instance, but by and large, they're just tools to get through combos. So it's interesting to think about how that design philosophy has changed, but I still don't like the current place that boss monsters are in right now in Yu-Gi-Oh! And last but not least, the first turn-centric nature of Yu-Gi-Oh! This is the one that I harp on the most because I really gotta say I don't like it so much. In Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, decks are graded almost entirely on how strong their first turn is. On your first turn, you just kind of pour everything out to the board. And it hasn't always been that way. In a lot of earlier days of Yu-Gi-Oh!, first turns could be as simple as like a T set, like setting 1 spell and trap, setting 1 monster. The idea might be to, grind with your opponent or slowly accumulate resources with any monster that floated, for instance. I think of like Goblin Zombie, right? But on the other hand, nowadays the combos are very consistent, so you rarely need to like take time to search the things that you want to use in your combo. Usually, a deck will have plenty of search cards, plenty of things that just start summoning from the deck, plenty of extra deck monsters, particularly link monsters that can just continue linking up, and they make crazy fields. And if your deck can't make a field with several disruptions or negations, or at least some type of monster protection, then your deck is considered bad by today's standards, which is really crazy to me that, the expectation is so high on just a deck's ability to go first that we've literally made dedicated decks that are like called going second spirals or going second this, that's wild to me. And, it doesn't like stop there either. It's the fact that, because that exists, games can feel like they're decided based on a dice roll. If you win the dice roll and you go first and you set up this board of, several monsters, the Thunder Guard Dragon example I gave earlier, where your opponent simply doesn't have the ability to fight back against it because there's just too much for them to get through, that kind of can feel a little bit unfair. Like, oh, I lost the dice roll. I guess I don't really get to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Now. And this is, excluding like the long combos that some decks do and everything. I just don't like how top heavy it can make the game feel, where, if you go first, you probably win unless your opponent has the hand traps or whatever, and then that opens up a conversation about like, are hand traps a good thing or not, which I don't have a problem with those, but I definitely don't like Yu-Gi-Oh! Being so first turn centric. I wish that we could slow things down a little bit and not let decks just reach their end game as quickly as they do.